Have you checked the children? You're a little mad sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Bienvenidos, Fright fans across the globe. Jaime and Fuego here, and I welcome you, for the first time in a hot minute at least, to a new installment of Run to the Hill! That is Reezy, and obviously, yes, very stoked to have you here for a little discussion about a recent release from none other than the son of Sai King, El Rey, my favorite author, who I have covered for over 300 episodes here on the Horror Show on Hail to Stephen King. But yes, we be talking Joseph Hillstrom King, or as he is known professionally, Joe Hill. And yeah, that's still something that anytime I do a video about Joe Hill, and we have covered just about every single thing on the channel here about him. And so, yeah, we did all of the Lock and Key comics, which is still what I contend might be his crowning achievement. It sadly just ended its final season on Netflix, and the show was diminishing returns, regrettably. It started out very promisingly with the Locke family and being a much more faithful adaptation. Then it veered down into, second season had its moments, but not so good, and the third was a bit disappointing because it was really just diverting from the source material significantly. However, Lock and Key, as I have to say, this is going to be, after this video, the only thing that we have not covered proper on the Horror Show. And, shout out to Cecil, who is busy this week filming none other than Dylan's New Nightmare, his sequel to Wes Craven's New Nightmare, a fan film, which sees the return of Miko Hughes as Dylan Porter, Dave McCrae as none other than the entity that takes on the guise of Fred Krueger. So, yeah, lots of exciting stuff happening there. But, yes, at some point, Cecil and I will get around to covering this particular tome here, which is the Golden Age Lock and Key. And so this is a collection of short stories about one of the older iterations of the Locke family, because I think we have like 3 or 4 different ones if I remember correctly. But this is specifically the family that has one of the most heart-tuggingly just vicious bits where there's a terminally ill young son, but they cover the other couple stories with that particular iteration of the Locke family from decades past that leads up to a crossover that they did with none other than Neil Gaiman's Sandman. It's exciting stuff, legitimately, and so I'm very much looking forward to when we can finally get around to a review of this proper and complete all the Lock and Key stuff. But yeah, so definitely covered all of the novels, from Nosferatu to The Fireman to all the way back at the very beginning, Heart-Shaped Box, his first novel proper, all of the short story collections, and the most recent release that was just a collection of novellas. Now, granted, he did do Full Throttle, which came after that, but that was all short stories. So his novella collection, Strange Weather, that preceded that, and is actually his only novella collection. So Joe did kind of the same format that his dad did with different seasons, and with 4 Past Midnight and Full Dark No Stars, where essentially 4 different, not quite short enough to be short stories and not quite long enough to be a full novel proper. And so Strange Weather was definitely where Joe, much akin to his father, was injecting a little bit more of his own personal politics into the story writing. It doesn't necessarily stick out like a sore thumb, but it is at times a little heavy-handed, and as a registered independent myself here during an election week, I was originally supposed to be going live once again, but there was just work-related stuff and, the election and all kinds of other things, and so, yeah, didn't end up being able to do that. But, yes, in the midst of a heavily publicized week of just politics and whatnot, which I'm not going to personally get into, just jump onto Joe and his father's Twitter, and you will most definitely know what side that they particularly lean to, and I'm not, saying good, bad, whatever, because I know that good storytelling can just cross all of those borders of division of, religion and politics and all kinds of other stuff. But yes, this was a collection in Strange Weather of 4 stories that, with the exception of Aloft, I believe was the title of it, about this kid in a band who gets stuck on a cloud after skydiving, which is my favorite of the collection from Strange Weather. But the 4th and final story from that collection did have that bit of injection of just personal ethos, but in a good way, and a little, it's more subtle, which I appreciate. And Also just tackling a lot of stuff that I believe is very important not to ignore, regardless of how you feel about it. And so it is the final tale, and it was recently adapted into a graphic novel. And this is Rain. So it was released in, I believe, 4 separate issues over the course of the last X number of months. I'm trying to remember if it actually debuted at the end of 2021 or if it wasn't until 2022. I think it was early here in this year of the double dose. But yes, finally released at the end of October in the collected form, which, you know, have to be a completist, have to have all of those in said collection and everything. And so yeah, man, I was originally going to do this upon the initial release, but I actually found it cheaper through an eBay person as opposed to my typical Amazon Prime, which is how I usually approach these sort of things. So yeah, I did not get my Rain collection until, boy, it was like after Halloween. And so yeah, here it is, and it's Butamus. It is a lovely collection, and so obviously adapting the story by Joe Hill, but the gentleman who is actually behind the adaptation process, who does a stellar job, David M. Boer? I'm trying not to butcher the pronunciation, but he's most known for a tale called Kanto, and then the illustrations are done by Zoe Thorogood. No relation, I'm assuming, to George, Born to be Bad, Bad to the Bone, all that good stuff. But the most noteworthy work from Thorogood is It's Lonely at the Center of the Universe. And so these were both 2 new creatives to me, and this was released by Image Comics. And so, yes, Image Comics. Wanted to just double check because Joe Hill has had like a very deep connection as of late with DC, because of Hill House Comics, which is the imprint that he started over there, where he did Basket Full of Heads and War Dogs, or whatever the hell that one was called, that was during the Revolutionary War, and there was like lichens or werewolves. I can't remember the distinction at times between the 2, but Hill House Comics also put out stuff from other just hand-picked creatives by Joe. So yeah, it's interesting to have this one fall at Image as opposed to at DC, because I mean, it's a fairly extreme story, but it's nothing that's gonna like absolutely like fry your mind in its gore, like Basket Full of Heads and the craziness that was. You can find the review of that here on the channel, and in fact, I'll probably link up that. I'll link up a couple different Joe reviews that myself and Cecil, you know, took the time to check out and stuff. But yeah, man, the tale very simply, Rain. And this is one where initially when reading the novella, on paper, the concept sounds a little silly, okay? Because the concept is none other than on a just bright and sunny day in August in Boulder, Colorado, all of a sudden, inexplicably, unexpectedly, obviously, nails start raining from the sky, and in the span of 8 minutes that day, kill like 8,000 people, 16,000 people, some like very tragic number. So everybody who is out in public, like not inside of their homes or whatever sort of protective area, yeah, they'd be dead. So there's images in this book of like, you know, dead giraffes at the zoo, and then, you know, a neighbor of our main character, who I'll get to in a moment, who is just sunbathing, you know, because they take the sunshine whenever they can in Colorado. Trust me, I remember visiting a few years ago when I was seeing a girl out there, and I had never been to Colorado before. And so it was interesting that I was visiting in the time in which that I was, because I always think of the connotation of, you know, just how cold and, you know, Mile High City and snow and all that different stuff. So yeah, the fact that they do have at least, you know, periods and portions here. And so that is where our story starts, man. And yeah, it does start with a bang, because we get an introduction to our main character. And that's something I gotta say about Joe in this one, is he comes up with some very interesting names for these characters. And our lead, her name is Honeysuckle Speck. And you're like, she sounds like she should be, you know, a character in a Southern romance novel or something like that, but nah, she's in Boulder, Colorado, and she is just about to move in with her girlfriend named Yolanda Rusted. And I'm like, Rusted? Interesting last name. I'm sure there's some sort of specific just connotations that I think he was trying to make with this book. And so, yeah, these 2 girls who are madly in love, and unfortunately, Honeysuckle's parents have essentially disowned her for this same-sex relationship, as awful as that is. And yet, on the opposite side of the spectrum, and the awesome thing about it is the fact that the couple that you might not have expected to be all okay with their daughter's relationship, which is the Rusteds, the dad being a pastor, no less, a doctor and a pastor, are the ones who are all for it. You know, they're the do-over parents, as is mentioned at one particular time in the story, which is obviously incredibly endearing to just look past some of your religious instruction, because as somebody who grew up in a Reformed Baptist Christian home, yeah, there's a lot of prejudice. It's really fucked up. It's no bueno, man. And so anytime you can go against the grain and just see the love between two people and that it affects nobody, I mean, hey man, and it's a theme that is explored heavily throughout this book, in just the aspect of prejudice, and the aspect of certain characters throughout what transpires do in fact mention that they think that these sort of relationships are what brought about the destruction, and there's a mention of Sodom and Gomorrah and all this different shit at one particular point by a character a little bit later. And so, yeah, it's, but really at the core of it, it's about what happens at the very beginning of the book. And so I'm not going to try the graphic novel and obviously the novella, but it is an exploration of grief, because on this day where Honeysuckle and Yolanda are about to move in together, because Yolanda had been living with her parents, obviously, in just outside of, it's like a suburb of Denver. And so they were going to move in together in Boulder, where Honeysuckle lives, and that is the day that the rain comes, and legit, as the mother is dropping off her daughter to, you know, move in and get everything done, that's immediately when the rain hits, and Honeysuckle's lover is killed. Boom, bang, in a gruesome fashion, just, you know, splintered with all of these nails. And this is where having the visualization helps significantly, because in the book there is some explanation about how this transpires, and it's most definitely mentioned here in the graphic novel as well. But I do have to say, seeing a visualization of the fact that it's more of these like weather formation, jagged crystals, almost like, you know, very jagged pieces of hail that have like a different just jagged consistency to them, you know, just very piercing in the way that they're forming up in these clouds and stuff. And so just seeing the visualization of all of these people just riddled, and animals too, as I mentioned, it kind of toned down the silliness on paper of the concept. Because, I mean, just here on the back, I mean, the skies are clear and Honeysuckle Speck couldn't be happier. She's finally moving in with her girlfriend Yolanda, but their world is literally torn apart when dark clouds roll in and release a downpour of nails. And you're just like, nails? Okay. But then, of course, splinters of bright crystals that shred the skin of anyone not safely undercover. And so, a big event like this, it's not a one and done, unfortunately. And the weather patterns are actually, even though some of the rain is like a shorter duration, you know, compared to those initial 8 minutes, the crystals are getting bigger. And even on top of that, these storms are spreading across like that area of the United States. And then you find out that it's not just isolated to our country, it's growing, it's expanding. And so, yeah, I mean, Joe has written apocalyptic stuff before in The Fireman. And so I would most definitely recommend that book, despite the fact that so many people have made the comparison to The Fireman and said, yeah, this is just him trying to do his version of The Stand by his dad. And yet, what a lot of people don't understand, at least, and are needlessly judgmental with regards to that particular story, in my estimation at least, is the fact that he was trying to write a twinner story of sorts, if, you know, for any deep, constant reader Sai King fans and stuff. And so, yeah, that's why a lot of the characters were deliberately given the same names as their counterparts on a different level of the tower. And so, yeah, I love The Fireman. I'm sad it hasn't been adapted, but anytime you're doing big apocalyptic stuff, whether it's on television with, like, Y the Last Man, or, you know, the recent adaptation of The Stand, which shall not be discussed. Believe me, we talked about it enough here on the channel. It's frustrating. Anyway, yeah, it takes a lot of dinero, dude. And so for that reason, I'm disappointed that The Fireman hasn't been made yet, because I believe it was optioned like right around when it came out, because Horns had already been done, and I think Nosferatu was already in development. But nonetheless, this is another apocalyptic tale, and so and the fact that it's taking place in Colorado, which is where a good chunk of The Stand takes place, yes, I guess you can see some parallels, but I would really say it's more taking inspiration from his dad's work and really running with it. Now, that's not to say that there aren't just like a myriad of just strange situations that happen with what Honeysuckle tasks herself to do after the death of her girlfriend and, her girlfriend's mother. She decides to try to make the trek from Boulder all the way to Denver, and she has to do it on foot because there's these crystal nail-like things all over the roads, and so you obviously can't take a vehicle, presumably pierce the tires, and so that's the plot device that gets us to her taking the biggest pair of tough-ass shit kickers she's got, and just making the march, dude. And so initially, she attempts to do it herself, and then she ends up getting some company along the way because, you always have to have at least, whether a larger group or smaller one. The whole isolated marching sort of thing, it doesn't really work so well because it would be all this internal dialogue, and perhaps that could be fine, but if you're going to have really rich characters, like we have a few in particular in this, you really have to have at least a handful of peeps, and one of the most interesting, this neighbor of Honeysuckle's, and it's a kid named Templeton, and I laugh every time I hear the name because I think of the character, the rat from Charlotte's Web, and I always think of the animated bit where Templeton is running around in the cartoon and he's eating all the leftover fair food, fair is a veritable smorgasbord, it's so great. Anyway, if you haven't seen the animated Charlotte's Web, it's terrific. But Templeton is this neighboring kid. He's like 8 years old, and he has taken on to wearing a vampire cape and like fake fangs and stuff, and pretending to be a vampire because his mother has him on these meds that it's these antibiotics for an affliction that he had, and so he has an adversity to the sun, and that's the only thing that saves this kid's ass from getting just piled with spikes like pretty much everybody else. So many other kids and people in the neighborhood and whatnot. Kid follows her, even when she most sternly told him not to when he said that he wanted to go along. And another plot bit is that the reason he's able to basically run away and follow this girl is because of the fact that his mom, Ursula, is dealing with massive grief herself, just like Honeysuckle. Honeysuckle has just recently lost her girlfriend Yolanda in the first storm. Ursula, the mother of Templeton, had her husband die in a very mysterious suicide driving off a cliff. And so she has been riddled with grief for a while, and that's presumably why her son is able to just dip out without her even, noticing or, knowing exactly, where direction-wise to pursue. And so, it's the couple of them along with another character who assists her at one particular point, and his name is Mark Despot, as in X marks the spot. And he's an MMA fighter that is 5-7, but he's undefeated in his last 4 matches. I thought that line was pretty funny. And so, for a gay woman to, at times there is most definitely, from my experience, an aversion to men at times because of the fact that, they've been very shitty, and the fact that this character has experienced prejudice. And so that's one thing that I really did appreciate about what Joe does in this story, is that he's no, every, woman of that, just of that sexual persuasion and orientation is not a man-hater. It doesn't work that way, especially when there is kindness and compassion that is presented, and most definitely in these crazy apocalyptic situations. And so the fact that the two of them bond over beating up these crazy comic cult people, which is another kind of subplot that Joe throws in here for whatever reason. Perhaps he overstuffs the turkey with all of these different ideas between the rumination of grief, between, the journey, on foot and everything. And obviously there is all kinds of theorization about how these storms are taking place, and they're oh, terrorists did it, and, the president wants to nuke whoever he thinks did it, and all that stuff. So yeah, there is a decent amount. It's not heavy-handed though, like I said, but it is definitely, it's in there. It's discussed, as you would expect people to, especially when this story was initially published, and, the little more take it to him, the president who was in the office at the time, and everybody knows the well-documented thoughts that Joe and his father have about our previous prez, but I'm not here to, open up said can of worms or anything. But there's definitely a lot of implying just that knee-jerk reaction and the finger pointing and all that stuff about why the hell this is happening. But yeah, the whole subsection with these cult people, and obviously the Heaven's Gate cult, if I remember correctly, was based in Colorado, and so, I don't know. They're singing Lionel Richie for whatever reason. It's just, I know it's trying to be humorous, it's weird though, and I mean, it feels a little bit out of place, and that's why I would mention the overstuffing the turkey reference, but whatever. They are one beat, a contingent that tries to thwart Honeysuckle from going and trying to let her perhaps eventual father-in-law, you know, her do-over dad, as is said, what happened to, you know, the rest of his family. And so, yeah, it's, they encounter some nastiness along the way. There's, like, escaped convicts. There's, like, you can tell that there would be lawlessness, right, in this sort of state, and that's what we pretty much encounter in so many of these apocalyptic situations and stories and whatnot, the dystopian aspect. And so, it's a rigorous journey, and when she gets there, comes to a head, and there's some intriguing revelations. Once again, I'm not trying to spoil the hell out of this, but yeah, it's a very solid story, and more so than anything, the artwork is, it's not necessarily the type of style. I'm trying to find a good image here. I know I've shown a few things, but it's the use of colors that I found most intriguing. So, just the purples and the blues and the greens and the yellows, it's a very different sort of style. I guess it almost feels like colored Walking Dead at times there too, you know? But obviously another post-apocalyptic story. But yeah, and like throughout, it is a hallmark of this, and it's one of the things that I honestly enjoyed the most, was just the incorporation of those just almost like neon kind of colors. It's very effective within the storytelling, and yeah, I mean, it's brutal at times, but it's not like insanely over-the-top gory. As I said, oh, that's a spoilery image, I'm not going to mess with that. But even the way the rain is done, like in this stuff here, it really gets the vibe of just the gloom and doom and hopelessness of the situation. And also, I believe, reflects the grief that Honeysuckle is experiencing, and we get so much internalization on her thoughts about it, and how it comes in waves, and, you know, different things of that nature. There's a really stark discussion early in the story between Ursula, the one whose husband died in the strange suicide, the mother of the Templeton character, and with Honeysuckle, and just the mom trying to advise her, just brace yourself, and this is how it's going to be, and so on and so forth. She's trying to give her some advice, but she's just coming off as, I don't know, somebody who is still so much in the thick of it that you don't know when the hell she's going to be able to, like, you know, swim up for air sort of thing. But yeah, this is a very, very solid adaptation. One of the things that I will say is that the revelation, because we do get some explanation in the end about how this all came to be. And I'm not going to spoil it, obviously, but it's my least favorite aspect of the story, is when we finally have, like, all the dots connected, and it's very much like kind of a spoon-fed conclusion, okay? There's a character that just kind of puts a bunch of pieces together, and it happens in literally, like, 2 pages of, like, internal, you know, monologue thinking, and a few images and stuff like that, and just, like, the big, like, huge eyes of, like, there's a really funny line that I want to jump to and just mention, because I thought it was incredibly cathartic when all of the evidence transpires. Oh, goodness. You're losing ratings here. Okay, and sometimes you solve a mystery by knocking over a bucket, as in, like, just the randomness of it, and how all of the pieces just kind of fit together very suddenly and all of a sudden. And so, hey, at least they address the fact that it all seems a little convenient and maybe a little outlandishly unexpected. And so, yeah, without going into details and spoiling, that is the one thing that I did not like about the end of this. However, I'm not saying who survives of our main trio, you know, of our MMA fighter, Honeysuckle, and Templeton the Kid, because they are our 3 main characters in this. And Templeton has another great moment where he's giving a eulogy, and they're like, how the hell does an 8-year-old know what a eulogy is? And he's like, oh, because my mom had to give one to my dad when he died. And you're just like, ouch. But he offers to give a eulogy to Honeysuckle's dead girlfriend and mother, And so, but yeah, his is, it's very much what you would expect from an 8-year-old, but it's heart-wrenching, and it's endearing, and it is serious, like, heartstring pulling, sort of just sad innocence coming to terms with things at an age which feels unfair. And yeah, it's really solid. I just honestly want to bring up that image real quick. But yeah, as a whole, man, this whole thing was, yeah, I mean, these 3 characters are just very solid and well developed, and the camaraderie that they have, the friendship and the care that forms over the course of this journey, and just kind of the unexpected friendship between Honeysuckle and Mark, and the more expected one, I would suppose, with, you know, a motherly, more maternal character in Honeysuckle with this little 8-year-old kid. And so they're an interesting trio, and yes, some of the set dressing, like I said, the cultists and whatnot, and kind of the darkly comedic aspect of them, that stuff is just okay, in my opinion, and the story could have done without it, perhaps. But long story short, man, I did really, really dig this. In fact, this probably elevated the source material for me, as I said earlier in this review, just getting the visualization aspect, man. Like, I found it impressive, and the very distinctive art style, which is significantly different than a lot of stuff that I have seen. And, you know, props to Cecil, he is so much more of a constant comic reader than me. I typically just gravitate to the occasional author that I know, or an adaptation in the graphic form of a property that I'm already priorly familiar with. They do leave this open to continue the story, just like Joe did in Strange Weather, although I'm not necessarily sure that, would they call it more rain or something like that, or, hurricane? Nah, probably not. That's stupid, Fuego. Stupid. But yeah, it does leave it open for this story to be continued at some particular point. There's moderate resolution, but not completely. It's kind of like door cracked open sort of bit. But yeah, guys, I gotta say, it does retail at $21.99 on Amazon. I was able to find it for, I think, like $4 or $5 cheaper, and so that's why you're seeing this review a lot later from its release. But hey, if you're checking out this video this crazy election week, thank you so very much. Significantly appreciated. I extend a grande gracias. I have been Jaime and Fuego. You can find more on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, here on the YouTubies. And yeah, you guys know the drill. Like, share, subscribe, all that goodness. And yes, I will make sure to link stuff up for a couple of our prior Joe Hill stories. We're going to get back to Sai King proper. There's 2 movie-related reviews that are going to be coming for Hail to Stephen King later this month. We have the anniversary of Miguel Ferrer and the Night Flyer, an underseen, awesome as fuck vampire Stephen King adaptation. So that's really good. We also have The Running Man, and then at some point, when schedules permit, I'm going to get around to this Blaze and Rage Bachman double feature. Filming this at kind of an odd time because it's a bit of a transitionary phase with, work and a very exciting new educational opportunity for me after having been kind of out of that sector and circle for quite some time. So a grande gracias for everybody bearing with kind of the weirdness of coverage and schedule at times and stuff like that. Just trying to right the ship and get all of those proverbial ducks in a row and stuff. So yes, once again, arigato, danke, merci. Thank you so very much for tuning into this. And yeah, guys, until we get to the next bit of Joe Hill stuff, because he allegedly has, like, another short collection he's trying to put together, and he's got a novel proper he's been trying to finish up, and so who knows when the next Joe Hill thing is going to be coming, but I am stoked as all hell for whenever it does. And until then, remember to stay scared and read Joe Hill. This is a great adaptation. Really solid.